Hi, I'm Lionel, this is TechLoto, and let's talk about Dehancer, a tool that's completely changed the way that I edit videos altogether. It's made the color grading process so simple for me, taking away the pain of having to color grade every time, having to change all those little details, but simplifying it in a simple plugin that you can add to Premiere Pro. So let's jump right into it with some example footage that I filmed in London and some footage that I filmed in Lisbon. And before we start, I also want to mention that you can get a discount on any Dehancer subscription using code TechLoto. That will give you a 10% discount. I found that the simplest way to use Dehancer is by creating an adjustment layer. You can then take that adjustment layer, drag it on top of your footage, and then apply Dehancer to that adjustment layer. And that just makes the process a lot easier and a lot smoother, rather than trying to apply it to every single piece of footage on your timeline. Once you've added the adjustment layer, just go to your video effects section, find a folder that is called Film Emulation. Of course, that's what we're going for. And then you can drag any of the versions of Dehancer onto your footage. So the one that I like to work with is 2.1.1. It's just what I feel comfortable in. I've tested it over about 3 months now, trying it with different options. That's just what I'm comfortable with right now. If I start working with a different one, I'll be sure to update this video and let you guys know. So just letting the footage play, you can see that I shot in a very simple format. So I was able to shoot in C-Log3 with my Canon R5, and I shot with my DJI Mini Pro drone. So the first thing that you need to do is go over to the input section, and you have an option to select the Rec 709 color space, or you can choose your own camera. I'd go for choosing my own camera because it's here. Of course, I use the Canon R5 and C-Log3 Cinema Gamut. I like to drop the exposure a bit because when I film footage, I tend to overexpose, and that's just so that I can get the same light. I shoot a very low ISO, and then I tend to overexpose just so that I can get all the right lights and shadows in my footage. Keeping the temperature the same. This is a very simple process. You can literally just simplify all of this. I do not use the defringe. I don't use anything like that. I keep all of it very simple. My contrast boost, I don't touch the contrast because again, I expose my footage to how I want it. And when you do touch the contrast, you can see how drastically it changes the footage. I think that film look, you don't really get too high contrast when you're trying to create that film look. But let's continue this process. Gamma radiation, that's normal. We keep that at 0 again. The color separation is at 100, and that's just so that the colors pop and they're completely different colors. So you can really work on that. And moving on to the color boost, I like to add the color boost and put it at about 60. The reason I like to do that is just because without it, my colors just look a little bit mute. So 30 is a reasonable side, but if you're trying to go for that slightly oversaturated look, because of a city like Lisbon, I really want the rooftops to pop so that people feel like they're there. So if you're trying to get that slightly oversaturated look, then you can work between about 40 and 60. But anything above that, I think you're pushing the footage too far. But again, that's my preference. The good thing to know is, yes, there's film emulation, but on the other hand, there's what you want to capture and the story that you want to tell as well. So moving on, once that's done, you want to make sure that you actually enable it so that it applies the settings of that section. Now, this is where the color profiles really stand out. It allows you to apply color profiles from different cameras. Now, this is where we get that film emulation that we were talking about. This is something that I've spent hours playing with, trying different cameras, really getting to see what actually works for me. For me, the Kodak Pro 100 is the way to go. I just absolutely love it, especially being someone of a darker complexion. I feel like it really brings out the richer, warmer colors. And with film, one thing that I find difficult to do is just highlight the brown tones. Obviously, brown are really just orange tones, but that's something that I always push for. So sometimes I do enable that, but if I'm shooting in a location, again, wanting that color to pop, then I'll remove it. But you can see how much it really impacts the footage and the contrast that you're getting on the footage. But if not, again, you can leave this off. Now, this is all completely done in Dehancer. The reminder is that I'm not using anything else to color grade. There's no other Lumetri color. There's nothing on this. This is all done through Dehancer. In fact, if I delete this adjustment layer here, you can see that the color is completely drained from it. But pop it back on, you're seeing the power of Dehancer. Now imagine you can use this on every single piece of film that you have, suiting that same location. Now, one thing I will say about Dehancer is that it works so much better in brighter settings. That's what I found. I haven't really used this for indoors, nighttime footage, but in terms of using this to go out to film, this is the way that I color grade all my footage. It's just very simple for me. So again, looking at the film compression, those are things that we can choose to enable. And what that does is it really helps you control the white point, so that those points where you have that overexposure, overly white look, you can really soften it, and it brings you just that little bit closer to that film footage. You can tell that these are really, really, really subtle. And one thing that doesn't look natural in film is overexposure. It's not gonna look natural. It's not gonna give you that film look. In fact, going over to the green section of the footage, you can really tell it completely ignores everything else apart from those white points, which is just a beautiful feature to have, where you can control the footage that much. And look at the impact that it makes on this scene. That's just astounding. Without really touching the jacket, without touching the hat, anything else like that too much. Just focusing on the white points is a game changer for me. And then we go here. So going over to the print, this is where again, it has that impact on how do you want your footage to look. In my opinion, if this isn't enabled, it has the potential to make the footage look a bit dreary and bland. I know we're going for that film look, but for me, I want there to be a difference in the white. Look at this scene. It takes away from that film look, and the footage starts looking a bit more like something that's captured on a digital camera. It's high contrast, it's very low light, but this allows you to have a bit more of that light spill coming through your footage, and I just love it. One thing you have to remember is this isn't necessarily a process that you have to go through every time if you're having similar footage. It might just be worthwhile knowing the parts that you really need and keeping them expanded, and then copying that adjustment layer for each video that you do. But let's move on to what you really came here for, the film grain. That's what we're all really here for. We love the film grain, we love to see it. Now, film grain is something where you can take it too far. And sometimes I like to remove it, and that's what you have to remember with film emulation. Yes, you're emulating film, but you're not restricted to add every single feature that you would see in a film. It's up to you to use Dehancer to empower the way that you create. It literally is in your hands. I think 8mm grain is a bit too heavy-handed, and if I'm going to use film grain, I like to go very, very, very subtle, and I'll pop mine on 65mm just to make it that subtle film grain that makes you say, what was this shot on? And something that all of the film communities really loves right now is Halation. We go crazy for it, and again, this is where overkill can easily come in. But let's lift that off the footage. And you can see that Halation doesn't just add highlights around your footage, but it has a significant effect on your color as well. Now, if you want your color to be consistent, if you want it to feel the same throughout the footage, that's something you have to be really considerate of. So let's add it again here. You can see how it adds that slight yellow, really starts to bring out the reds in the footage. Let's go to somewhere where it's quite strong. Here, you can see the impact. But again, heavy-handed Halation. I think that's too much. It feels too strong. Look at the sections around his jumper. It's just too much for me. But again, if you're comfortable with that, if you're doing something, just maybe something short, something for the internet, that's fine. But I guess the question that most people would ask is, what's the point of adding Halation if it's so subtle and you can't really see it? Well, I think that's the best type of footage, where you know there's something going on, but you can't quite put your finger on it. You don't really want to watch something and say, oh, I know exactly what he did and how he did it. Some people love that, but I think that's part of the mystery. And it immerses someone in the footage. You don't want the effects that are created for the footage to take over the story that you're trying to tell and the way you're trying to make the audience feel. This isn't a film creation lesson. I am not an expert at film creation, but I do love creating the film look. But those are the simple inputs, and those are the simple features that I use to create a look for my footage, and I apply that same look across my footage. And it's genuinely changed the way that my content has come out. It's genuinely changed the feel of my content. Just look at the way it lifts the lights in this section. Look at the way it really brings out the lights and the colors. That's astounding. So if you're asking me for the simplest way to get that film look with your footage, I would absolutely say that Dehancer is the way to go. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you'd like me to cover Dehancer with a little bit more depth, let me know in the comment section below, and let me know if there are any sections of Dehancer that you use to really lift your footage or that you'd like me to cover.